Imagine having billions in cash, a last name on every most wanted list on the planet, and every Western government eager to see you in handcuffs or a body bag. Now imagine you have children. Children who grew up surrounded by armored Lamborghinis, mansions with underground bunkers, and bodyguards armed to the teeth. What happens to those children when the empire crumbles? Where do the heirs of the most lethal kingpins in history hide? Because some chose a life of anonymity, others inherited a throne built on violence, and one of them is right now leading Mexico's most brutal cartel from the shadows. And he wasn't even born on Mexican soil. But hold on, because what you're about to discover about each of these names will keep you glued to the screen. And the first thing you need to understand is that not every child of a kingpin walks the same path. There's a pattern that repeats throughout this story. Most of them try to run from the family name, but the name always catches up. Some ended up taking refuge in countries you'd never imagine. Others have been living under completely fake identities for decades, and those who chose to stay in the business are surrounded by a military and legal net that tightens with every passing day. We're going to cover 13 destinies from Buenos Aires to Miami, from the mountains of Sinaloa to an anonymous suburb on the east coast of the United States where a former heir to Mexico's most powerful cartel now works at an auto shop fixing cars. And I'll tell you right now, each case is more shocking than the last, and there are connections between them that nobody has ever told you about. Sebastián Marroquín, the heir who chose to disappear. His real name is Juan Pablo Escobar Henao, son of the man who became the 7th richest person in the world according to Forbes. The founder and absolute leader of the Medellin cartel. When his father was brought down by Colombian authorities on December 2, 1993, one day after turning 44, Juan Pablo was 16. And what followed was an odyssey that few people know in the detail it deserves. The Escobar family tried to seek refuge in at least 17 different countries. Spain rejected them outright. Germany detained them in the transit zone of Frankfurt Airport, interrogated them for hours, contacted the Colombian government, and put them on a return flight in under 48 hours. Mozambique received them briefly because they had an arrangement with representatives of the African nation, but it was a country devastated by a recent civil war, and they could only stay a few days before realizing the situation was unworkable. Every door they knocked on closed with the same argument. Nobody wanted the Escobar name on their soil, and while the entire world turned them away, back in Colombia their father's enemies were circling. Los Pepes, the Cali cartel, they all wanted to finish off the family and close the chapter for good. There's a detail Juan Pablo revealed in his book that sends chills down your spine. The day they tried to fly to the United States with his sister, 2 cousins, his girlfriend, and an aunt. The criminal group Los Pepes was waiting at the airport exit to take them out. Immigration authorities held them back with excuses about paperwork, preventing them from boarding the flight. Juan Pablo managed to escape the situation by helicopter. When he arrived at the safe house where his father was hiding, Pablo Escobar greeted him with a long embrace and said with a smile, "You played the helicopter move perfectly. You left them all behind," while patting him repeatedly on the shoulder. It was Colombian prosecutor Gustavo de Graef who finally opened the doors to Argentina for them. But before landing in Buenos Aires, Colombian authorities changed their identities entirely. Juan Pablo became Juan Sebastián Marroquín Santos, and later adopted the name Sebastián Marroquín, which is how he's known today. His mother, Victoria Eugenia Henao, became Maria Isabel Santos Caballero, and his sister Manuela was transformed into Juana Manuela Marroquín Santos. He picked the last name Marroquín from the Buenos Aires phone directory. That's how raw and desperate it was. The son of the most hunted criminal in Colombian history chose his new identity by flipping through a phone book because airlines refused to sell him tickets under the name Escobar. But here's what Netflix documentaries usually leave out. Before he could live in peace, Juan Pablo had to negotiate directly with the Cali cartel, his father's worst enemies, formally committing to never seek revenge. He handed over properties, money, everything he had left. And even then, in 1999, when Argentine authorities discovered who the Marroquin Santos family really were, they imprisoned his mother and him for 15 months on suspicion of money laundering. The blow was devastating, especially for his sister, whom we'll talk about later. Today, Sebastian lives in Palermo, Soho, Buenos Aires, with his wife Maria Angeles Sarmiento and his son Juan Emilio. He graduated as an architect and works as an industrial designer. He's an international speaker and ambassador for the World Organization for Peace. His documentary, Sins of My Father, led him to confront the children of his father's victims face to face. He's written several books translated into dozens of languages, and in every interview he repeats the phrase that sums up his transformation: "I am not my father." The ultimate irony is that in September 2024, in the middle of the crisis triggered by the capture of Manuela Zambada, he was in Mazatlan, Sinaloa, giving a talk titled "A Story Not to Be Repeated." The son of Escobar, delivering anti-crime lectures in the heart of cartel territory. Michael Corleone Blanco, the last survivor. His mother named him after the character Al Pacino played in The Godfather. And if you think that was a coincidence or a cinematic whim, then you don't know Griselda Blanco, the woman who laid the foundations for the illegal trade of substances in Miami long before Pablo Escobar himself. They called her the Black Widow because she's suspected of ordering the elimination of each of her husbands. Her first husband, Carlos Trujillo, has been linked to a suspicious death. Her second husband, Alberto Bravo, was taken out by Griselda herself after she discovered his infidelity. Her third husband, Dario Sepulveda, Michael's father, was gunned down by two individuals dressed as police officers, allegedly on Griselda's direct orders as retaliation for taking the boy to Colombia in an attempt to pull him away from the criminal world. Of Griselda's four sons, Michael Corleone Sepulveda Blanco is the only one still breathing. And that's not a coincidence. It's a statistical miracle. His three half-brothers met the worst possible fate for getting involved in the family business. Osvaldo was taken out at a bar in 1990. Dixon met the same end shortly after getting out of prison. Uber lost his life in what's believed to have been a settling of scores. Three brothers, three identical and violent fates. And Michael witnessed all of it growing up. When Griselda was imprisoned, Michael was 12 years old. At that age, he inherited the responsibility of a multi-million-dollar criminal empire. He grew up in Miami surrounded by obscene luxury. Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Rolls-Royces. His own bodyguards drove sports cars. I saw a lot of luxury as a kid here in Miami. My entire parking lot was full of high-end cars, he said in interviews. But the price of that luxury was constant paranoia that robbed him of any semblance of a normal childhood. There were very few times I played with other kids, he confessed. He lived locked away under surveillance, terrified by the possibility of being kidnapped or taken out simply for being the son of the most dangerous woman in South Florida. Michael followed in his mother's footsteps until the age of 33 when he was captured and served time behind bars. When he got out, he made the decision that saved his life, to break the cycle. Today he lives in Miami with his wife Marie and their three children. He founded Pure Blanco, a clothing brand that markets the aesthetic of the criminal world with designs that reference his mother's empire. He appeared on the reality show Cartel Crew on VH1, wrote My Mother the Godmother, and in January 2024 sued Netflix over the series Griselda starring Sofia Vergara, claiming the family was never consulted. He called it a slap in the face. He also runs a company tied to the legal cannabis industry. He asks for forgiveness for his mother's crimes but sells t-shirts with her face on them. A contradiction he resolves with a quote from the Black Widow herself. Weak is dangerous. Ivan Archivaldo Guzman Salazar. The Chapito nobody can catch. If there's an heir who chose the exact opposite path from Sebastian Marroquin, it's Ivan Archivaldo. The eldest son of El Chapo Guzman, born on August 15, 1983, didn't just inherit his father's business. He expanded it to levels that even El Chapo himself never reached. The DEA considers him the operational leader of Los Chapitos and offers $10 million for his capture. His operations include massive trafficking of powerful synthetic substances and the importation of chemical precursors from China. But what makes Ivan Archivaldo's story truly extraordinary is the number of times he's managed to escape justice. In February 2005, at just 21 years old, he was detained in an operation in Zapopan, Jalisco, while driving a BMW X5 that tried to evade a police checkpoint. He was locked up in a maximum security prison for suspected money laundering. However, a judge determined the evidence was insufficient, and he walked free in 2008. In August 2016, when he was already a consolidated cartel leader, the CJNG kidnapped him along with his brother Jesus Alfredo and 4 other people at the exclusive restaurant La Leche in Puerto Vallarta at 1 in the morning. The kidnapping lasted 5 days. They were freed thanks to negotiations led by Manuela Zambada with the rivals. In October 2019, when authorities captured his half-brother Ovidio in Culiacan, Ivan orchestrated what's now known as the Culiacanazo. Massive roadblocks set up by cartel members, vehicles set ablaze in the streets, bursts of gunfire that terrorized civilians. 8 people lost their lives, 68 military vehicles were hit by bullets, and 51 inmates escaped from the Aguaruto prison. The pressure was so overwhelming that the government released Ovidio. And in February 2025, according to a report by the Wall Street Journal that shook the security world, Ivan Archivaldo escaped a special forces operation in Culiacan using an underground tunnel, replicating exactly the technique his father used when he broke out of the Altiplano prison in 2015. Military forces found evidence of his recent presence in the safe house, but he was already gone. According to journalist José Luis Montenegro, since then Ivan Archivaldo has been living in a state of permanent terror. He doesn't sleep in the same place 2 nights in a row, has radically changed his security protocols, and according to sources from the rival faction, has begun turning in his own people to stay 1 step ahead of authorities. In December 2025, his brother-in-law and father-in-law were captured in Zapopan, both financial operators for the group. Some reports suggest he fled to Costa Rica with the help of his cousin Jaziel Abdiel Guzman. Meanwhile, his brother Ovidio pleaded guilty in December 2025 to trafficking and money laundering charges, and his half-brother Joaquin remains in U.S. custody since July 2024. The net around the last free Chapito grows tighter with every operation. Jesus Alfredo Guzman Salazar, the ghost of Los Chapitos. If Ivan Archivaldo is the public face of Los Chapitos, his younger brother Jesus Alfredo is the absolute enigma. Born on May 17, 1986 in Zapopan, Jalisco, Alfredillo has never been captured by Mexican authorities. And it's not for lack of trying. In June 2012, the Mexican Navy announced with great fanfare his arrest during an operation in Zapopan. They presented him to the press alongside $135,000 in cash, 2 rifles, 4 grenades, and forged documents. But hours later, the truth came out. The person in custody wasn't Alfredillo. It was a used car salesman from Jalisco named Felix Beltran. It was a public humiliation of enormous proportions for Mexican security forces. So little information exists about Jesus Alfredo that he's almost ghost-like. His former associate Damaso Lopez Serrano, known as El Mini Leak, described him in an interview with Milenio as the most violent of all Los Chapitos, with unpredictable and erratic behavior when he drinks. But he also acknowledged that Alfredillo has been a key figure in the cartel's growth. U.S. authorities identify him as the main coordinator for trafficking chemical precursors from Asia and for collecting profits from the distribution of illegal merchandise. The most striking part of his story is what happened after the Puerto Vallarta kidnapping in 2016. Alfredillo fled to Medellin, Colombia, with the help of a criminal cell known as La Terraza. He changed his name to enter the country undetected by Colombian authorities. According to intelligence reports covered by the Mexican press, he moved through San Jeronimo, Envigado, and the entire metropolitan area of Antioquia, the same region where Pablo Escobar had built his empire decades earlier. The history of organized crime in Latin America has these circular ironies that seem written by a fiction screenwriter. His current whereabouts remain a mystery. He's believed to be hiding somewhere in Sinaloa, coordinating operations with a profile so low it stands in stark contrast to his brother Ivan's flamboyance. The United States offers $10 million for his capture. He is, along with Ivan Archivaldo, the last Chapito who remains free and active. Ismael Zambada Sicairos, the heir to the endless war. While Los Chapitos dominate international headlines, there's another Kingpin's son waging a brutal and silent war from the shadows of the Sinaloa mountains. El Mayito Flaco, son of Ismael El Mayo Zambada Garcia, is the current leader of La Mayitza, the faction directly battling the sons of El Chapo Guzman for total control of the Sinaloa cartel. Born in 1982 in Sinaloa, he was trained from his teenage years by his own father to oversee international trafficking routes, money laundering operations, and security systems. He's the second-born son of the cartel's co-founder, and he has 3 brothers who already went through the U.S. judicial system: Vicente, known as El Vicentillo, Serafin, and El Mayito Gordo. Since September 9, 2024, when the internal war erupted following his father's capture, El Mayito Flaco has led an armed conflict that has turned Culiacan and its surrounding areas into a permanent war zone. The DEA is actively searching for him on conspiracy charges for distributing controlled substances and considers him armed and extremely dangerous. According to journalist Anabel Hernandez, El Mayito Flaco has already begun negotiations for a possible voluntary surrender to U.S. authorities, with his brother Vicente acting as mediator. Vicente being a protected witness. Journalist J. Jesus Lemus confirmed that the DEA has extended him an offer to become a protected witness, with the goal of replacing the intelligence source his imprisoned father represents. Sources close to the Zambada circle say El Mayito Flaco is growing increasingly isolated, that he uses substances, and that his alliance with Fausto Isidro Meza Flores, known as El Chapo Isidro, has completely fallen apart. His main allies have been weakened or neutralized. Los Salazar are pulled back into Sonora. The Caborca groups were dismantled following the extradition of Rafael Caro Quintero. El Mayito Flaco is increasingly alone in a war that seems to have no end in sight. Juan Carlos Valencia Gonzalez, the American-born heir to Mexico's most violent cartel. And this is where the story takes a turn nobody saw coming, because the new leader of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, considered the most powerful and violent criminal organization in Mexico following the fall of its founder in February 2026, was not born on Mexican soil. Juan Carlos Valencia Gonzalez was born on September 12, 1984 in Santa Ana, California. He's a full-fledged American citizen, and that circumstance gives him legal protection without precedent in the history of Latin American organized crime. Known as El 03 or El Pelon, Juan Carlos is the stepson of El Mencho and biological son of Armando Valencia Cornelio, founder of the now-defunct Milenio Cartel, captured in 2003 and released in 2020 after battling cancer. His mother, Rosalinda Gonzalez Valencia, known as La Jefa, served time for money laundering and was granted early release in 2025. She is a central figure in the financial clan known as Los Quines. Following the elimination of El Mencho in a military operation in Tapalpa, Jalisco, on February 22, 2026, Juan Carlos rose to the throne. According to the Wall Street Journal, as soon as the Kingpin was laid to rest in a gold-plated coffin, his stepson began consolidating power. At least 2 high-ranking lieutenants agreed not to challenge his leadership. Mexican prosecutors describe him as extremely violent. He led the cartel's Delta and Elite Group units. The United States offers $5 million for his capture, but because he's an American citizen, investigating him requires approval from the Attorney General and authorization from a federal court. A legal labyrinth that makes him the most protected heir in organized crime. William Rodriguez Abadia, the Prince of Cali who turned himself in. William is the son of Miguel Rodriguez Orejuela, co-founder of the Cali Cartel. the organization that amassed a fortune of $12 billion and controlled more than 4,000 properties in Colombia and abroad. When his father was captured in August 1995, William inherited the political and legal leadership of the cartel. I was like the prince of the city. I even had the audacity to walk into the National Congress to buy people's loyalty, he has confessed. But his reign was short-lived. An attack at a restaurant in Cali took the lives of 5 of his companions while he was wounded. That day, he decided to leave the business, a decision that infuriated his uncle Gilberto. He lived 4 years in hiding until he watched on television as his father and uncle were extradited. He turned himself into U.S. authorities in Panama in 2005. He negotiated. In exchange for information, his sentence was reduced from 22 to 5 years. Since 2010, he's been living as a free man in the United States, though he cannot leave the country. He works in construction, gives talks on conflict resolution, holds a master's degree from IE Business School in Madrid, and has a law degree. He wrote, "I am the son of the Cali cartel." His father Miguel, now over 80 years old, remains in prison and is set for release in 2028. Fernando Rodriguez Mondragon, the chess player's son caught by the Finns. Fernando is the son of Gilberto Rodriguez Orejuela, the other co-founder of the Cali cartel, known as the chess player. Unlike his cousin William, Fernando stayed in Colombia. He wrote "The Son of the Chess Player" and seemed to be living a quiet life in Roldanillo, Valle del Cauca, until in 2021 authorities seized 3,493 shark fins at El Dorado Airport, hidden among swim bladders destined for Hong Kong and linked to his company Fernapez. Between 900 and 1,000 sharks from endangered species had been slaughtered. Earlier in 2022, illegal substances were found in his possession, and he attempted to bribe the officers. He accepted the charges as an accomplice, was sentenced to 48 months with a suspended sentence. Today he moves freely throughout Colombia. Banks expelled him from the financial system and a credit union canceled his account, accusing him of being an ally of terrorism. His recurring phrase, "I'm still paying the price for carrying the Rodriguez last name." His father, Gilberto, passed away in a U.S. prison in 2022. Manuela Escobar, the princess who vanished from the map. If there's a ghost in this story, someone who managed to disappear completely from the visible world, it's Manuela. Pablo Escobar's youngest daughter was only 9 years old when her father was taken down on a Medellin rooftop. She grew up as the absolute princess of Colombia's most powerful kingpin at the legendary Hacienda Nápoles, surrounded by private zoos with exotic animals, swimming pools, go-karts, and a level of luxury that defied all logic. Her father once had a cow horn embedded into the forehead of a fine horse to make her a Christmas unicorn, a whim Manuela had asked for with the innocence of any little girl. The animal died days later from the infection caused by the outrageous surgery, but Escobar's princess got her gift. She was also left with permanent hearing damage as a result of the bombing of the Monaco building when the Cali cartel attacked the family residence in Medellin with a car bomb, the first car bomb of the war between cartels. In Argentina, where she adopted the name Juana Manuela Marroquin Santos, she managed for a few years to have something close to a normal life. She took the public bus to school, made friends her own age, and the singer Piero, who was then Buenos Aires Secretary of Culture, even tried to include her in a children's choir he was forming. But when the other children's parents discovered that the shy girl was actually Pablo Escobar's daughter, they flatly refused to let their kids share a stage with her. And in 1999, when the true identity of the Marroquin Santos family was publicly revealed, it was the final blow for Manuela. Her mother and brother were imprisoned for 15 months. She wasn't prosecuted because she was a minor, but she stopped going outside, dropped out of school permanently, and was educated by private tutors in her apartment, exactly the way she had lived during the years of hiding with her father. Her mother described it years later for a Spanish newspaper in words that chill you to the bone. "My daughter still lives paralyzed. She hasn't been able to get past the shock of the pain this war brought to our family." Unfortunately, to this day, she feels like she doesn't belong in this world despite her good behavior. Because discrimination won't let her grow and pain follows her like a shadow. Manuela has no social media, has never given an interview, there isn't a single recent photograph of her anywhere in the world, and nobody knows for certain what she does or who she lives with. She resides somewhere in Buenos Aires, having become what one international outlet described as the Rapunzel of the cartel world. She even filed a legal action against the Colombian government because they were still charging her taxes on properties her father put in her name when she was just 3 years old. Assets that were subject to forfeiture decades ago. Her exact whereabouts are a black hole that not even her own brother, now a public figure and international speaker, dares to reveal. Nora and Brenda Esparagosa, the heiresses of invisibility. Juan José Esparagosa Moreno, known as El Azul, was perhaps the most enigmatic co-founder of the Sinaloa Cartel. A former agent of the now-defunct Federal Security Directorate who became a mediator between rival cartels, known in intelligence circles as the Conciliator, and in some U.S. Treasury reports as the godfather of substance trafficking in Mexico. His nickname came from skin so dark it appeared to have a bluish tone. He supposedly died of a heart attack in June 2014, 15 days after suffering a car accident. But neither Mexican authorities officially confirmed his death nor was a body ever found. The then Attorney General Jesus Murillo Caram stated that after several days of investigation, they had found no evidence confirming his death. There are those who believe he faked his own death. And his daughters inherited the ultimate philosophy he preached: total invisibility as the greatest weapon for survival. Nora Patricia Esparagosa Gastelum studied in 4 different countries: the Monterrey Institute of Technology in Mexico, the elite boarding school Serval Montfleury in the Swiss city of Montreux, the University of Belgrano in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and at an institution in the United States. 4 countries, 4 elite institutions, a profile designed to go unnoticed anywhere in the world. Brenda Guadalupe was identified by the U.S. Treasury Department as a front for her father, operating real estate companies in the Guadalajara metropolitan area to launder cartel money under the cover of residential Provenza and a shopping center in Tlajomulco de Zúñiga. In 2013, the Attorney General's office froze both sisters' bank accounts as part of money laundering investigations. Since then, they've fought an endless legal battle in Mexican courts. Nora got a federal judge to order the release of more than 20 million pesos in May 2023, and Brenda is claiming an additional 28 million. Brenda moved to Quintana Roo, where she operates a group of companies that, according to the U.S. Treasury, continue to finance illicit activities. And the family recently made international headlines for a completely unexpected reason. Diana Rosalia Esparagosa, another descendant of El Azul, was photographed walking hand-in-hand with singer Peso Pluma through the streets of Paris, sparking a firestorm on social media. Vicente Zambada Niebla, the turncoat living under a false name. And now we arrive at the case that best illustrates how American justice works when an organized crime heir decides to switch sides. Vicente, known as El Vicentillo, was the firstborn son of Mayo Zambada and the natural heir to his empire. Born in 1975 in Culiacan, he began working for the cartel at the age of 15. He was captured in March 2009 in Mexico City by the Mexican army and extradited to the United States in February 2010. And what he did after arriving on American soil forever changed the internal dynamics of the Sinaloa cartel. He pleaded guilty in April 2013 to trafficking more than $1 billion worth of substances, accepted an asset forfeiture of $1.3 billion, and became a protected witness for the Department of Justice. He handed the DEA the exact locations of his father's safe houses, the clandestine airstrips in the Golden Triangle, the phone numbers his father used, and the names of government officials who received monthly bribes. He testified against El Chapo Guzman in the trial of the century in Brooklyn. His information was considered so valuable that the judge described him as one of the most important witnesses in the history of the fight against substance trafficking on the continent. Since 2021, he's been living freely somewhere in the United States under a completely new identity alongside his wife, Cynthia Borboa, and their children. According to reports from the outlet Illicit Investigations, the family operates a modest auto repair shop in an East Coast suburb. His children work as auto mechanics and real estate agents. In early 2024, he was photographed at Ronald Reagan Washington Airport, the only known image of his new life. During his incarceration, Vicente taught himself to paint, played piano and guitar, and read more than 400 books over 9 years. The paintings he made were mailed to his father, who proudly displayed them on the walls of his secret hideout in Sinaloa. And according to journalist Anabel Hernandez, El Vicentillo has already visited his own father in the Brooklyn jail, completing a reunion that Mayo Zambada had longed for over a decade. Now prosecutors have him on the list of potential witnesses against his father in an eventual trial, meaning father and son could come face to face in a federal courtroom in New York. Ismael Zambada Imperial, El Mayito Gordo who walked free. The case that closes the Zambada circle. The eldest son of El Mayo with Margarita Imperial Lopez, he was famous for being one of the first kingpins to flaunt his lavish lifestyle on social media. Luxury cars, horses, expensive watches, and weapons. He was a pioneer in showing off the criminal life on Instagram, long before the era of corridos tumbados. Captured in November 2014 at a ranch 60 kilometers from Culiacan and extradited in 2019, he pleaded guilty to importing substances into the United States. He was sentenced to 9 years, but since his time served was counted from 2014, he walked free from the San Diego Detention Center in July 2022. His release coincided with the capture of Rafael Caro Quintero just 6 days earlier, raising suspicions. The following day, ICE took him into custody for deportation. He fought to remain on U.S. soil. Recently, a Mexican court denied him an injunction to adjust his pending sentence, which means that if he's repatriated, more years behind bars await him. He's the fourth Zambada to exit the U.S. prison system. 13 children. 13 radically different destinies. Some vanished from the map under fake names. Others inherited empires built on violence and now hide in underground tunnels. One leads Mexico's most violent cartel with an American passport that makes him nearly untouchable. But the most disturbing part, none of them got to choose the last name they were born with. If you want the full story on any of them, let me know in the comments. Each one deserves an episode of their own.